Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Tractorman 44 here. You know, a lot of you old guys are probably tired of seeing this old tractor and watching the old wood splitter, in the woodpile. But there's some new viewers that might not be familiar with the rig, the setup, that I use is preparing wood. And I don't know, splitting wood just fun, so I may as well take a picture of it while I'm doing it. So for the new viewers, I'm just going to give you a quick overview. Now, what I use mostly on this wood splitter because of its economy is one of the multiple Massey Harris Model 30s I've got. They run really, really good and don't use near as much fuel as what the 33s and 44s do. So I really enjoy using the 30s. They're nice and nimble. They're easy to maneuver without power steering. They don't have that big monstrous motor up front that makes it difficult to turn. It's just a nice, neat little utility tractor for this function. But I convert most of them over to 12 volt, put voltmeters and stuff in them, totally rewire them, try to make them as reliable as possible. Now this looks like a hodgepodge of materials, and it really is. It's a combination of different industrial machines and farm machines, that had been taken apart over the years. And this was built by my much older brother in 1978 or thereabouts. It's a power takeoff driven unit. We got a set of gears and everything, bearings and stuff off of like a Massey Harris field chopper. That increases the RPM 540 to the required RPM we need to run and get full benefit of the GPM of the pump. I have mistakenly labeled this pump before in previous videos as 44 gallons a minute. In going back and doing a little bit of research, I was absolutely wrong. This is a 28 gallon per minute single stage pump. Single stage pump meaning it's not going to go into that slower second stage where you have to get all the build up the additional pressure for the real tough ones. You rely on the horsepower of the tractor that you're using, and we run sometimes as much as a 45, 50 horsepower tractor on this instead of this little bitty 30. The coolest thing of the cool is if you take a look at the axle, it's got that funny looking A-framed axle laying down almost horizontally. What I do is I hook up to the wedge and I can actually use a cylinder to actually change the elevation to raise the beam all the way up to whatever height that I want, all the way up to my upper stomach area, if tall guy's using it, all the way down to 8 inches off the ground because that's an 8-inch I-beam there, and rest it all the way down there so you can roll the big heavy chunks up on it. Now, you can see the wedge, it's a fixed wedge, and the wedge is actually tapered or angled a little bit up at the top, which allows the push plate, when it pushes into the chunk of wood, it allows it to be forced downward. But it's ever so subtle of a tilt in on the upper portion of the wedge. But at any rate, you can see, here was the original wedge we started off with in 1978, only 6 inches tall, 2 inches wide, and of course ground to a point in the middle. And there's also behind this large plate, there's a 6-inch push plate here too. We found out pretty quickly that it'd be much more desirable to have a larger push plate. So he fiddled around with the dimensions and everything and added just I think he added 2 inches to it first and then put just extra wing on. Then he added another 4 inches, then we added the extra 3 inches on top. So we ended up with roughly a 14-inch wedge and about a 12.5 or 13-inch push block. And that works out really, really good with the larger rounds and all that stuff. And also knowing about what hydraulic pressure does to steel, this beam, instead of being a standard 8-inch beam, is really reinforced. If you look under this wedge here and you see all these webbings, these 3/8-inch plate webbings that are actually welded every 6 inches from one end of the beam to the other. Those are gussets that he welded in, to stiffen up the beam to make sure there was no beam flex. You can see a 1/4-inch plate welded on the top here for an extra additional rub block. And then in addition to these gussets being welded on both sides of the I-beam, he put 3/8-inch squares inside those gussets on both sides. So with the 3/8 webbing and 3/8 plates on either side, this beam actually ends up 1 1/8 inches thick right here with the reinforcements of the additional gussets and stuff, the full length. So it is a very stout beam. Now this arm down here in the ground, I just pick that arm up right here and I can pin that arm into this little accessory bolted onto the side of the push block, and then that's what we use to change the elevation of the kneeling axle right there. And of course the reservoir is nothing more than about a 12-inch diameter piece of Schedule either 40 or 80 steel tubing that plates are welded onto the end, to make a tank out of it. And I don't remember how many gallons of oil it's got in it, but it gets hot all the way up to here, so that's probably a good 24, 26, 28 gallons of reservoir reserve. And of course from back here you can see the back end of the old Massey Harris. That was about a 1950 or 51 right there. Unfortunately, we don't have an unlimited number of trees or supply of wood to where we can keep fresh green wood, you know, to split all the time to put into the shed for storage. We have to take wood whenever it's given to us, and sometimes we don't have the choice of having all good wood. So what you saw right there is an example of some of the tree trimmer wood that's not the most desirable kind of wood and has a tendency to rot fairly quickly. And what we do is we don't even waste space inside the shed. We'll go ahead and toss that off to the side, and we use that, you know, for burning outside in the workshops and not waste space in the wood shed for the good wood. And if you notice this piece right here, what I'm doing, I'm taking all the rotted or rotting sapwood off of the good heartwood, and then all I'm going to do is put the heartwood in the woodshed, and the rest of the sapwood's just out here on the junk pile, and that'll get burnt out in the shed. I don't know if that makes any sense to y'all, but that's what we've been doing for years, because we do have a limited spot for good wood. We may as well put the good wood inside under root and just let the nasty stuff, you know, just set it outside under the tin and burn that in the shed. As you can tell, the missus kind of walked up and gave me a little bit of a surprise right there. I wasn't expecting her to show up. But she said lunch is going to be ready in just a few minutes, so you know what? This is going to be a real short video. Well, y'all got an idea now what it is I'm going to do the rest of the afternoon. You can see I got a little bit more to split yet, you know, so you know what? This Trackman 40.